All right, let's dive into part-time work for international students in Singapore. You might be thinking about studying abroad, curious about student life there, or just love learning about different systems.
Yeah, it's interesting. Singapore encourages international students to work, but they have a really well-defined framework in place.
So it's a balancing act, right? Academic focus with real-world experience. Can international students even work part-time in Singapore?
They absolutely can, but Singapore's Ministry of Manpower, or MOM, has very specific rules. It's not a free-for-all, like you said.
Okay, so what's the first thing students need? What do they need to be eligible to work?
The first thing is a valid student pass.
So that's a must-have.
That's non-negotiable. And then you also need to be enrolled full-time in an approved institution. And this is where it gets interesting. MOM has a list of these approved institutions right on their website. So, for example, James Cook University Singapore is on there, but some other private institutions aren't, which would mean that their students wouldn't be eligible for part-time work. So checking that list is really important.
Wow, I hadn't even considered that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So let's say you are at an approved institution and you've got your student pass all sorted. How many hours can you actually work?
So during term time, the limit is 16 hours per week.
Okay.
And that's really meant to make sure that your work isn't overshadowing, your studies.
Right, got to prioritize that degree.
Exactly. But during holidays, you're totally free to work full-time.
Oh, nice. Catch up on bills, maybe even explore a bit more of Singapore.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, what about the jobs themselves? What are the popular gigs in Singapore for students?
Well, some things are universal.
Yeah,
Retail jobs are always in demand, right?
of course.
Sales assistants, cashiers, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Same for F&B, so waiters, baristas.
Right, right.
But I'm guessing you're looking for something a bit more Singapore specific.
Yeah, you know me too well. I was doing a little bit of reading, and it seems like tutoring is huge in Singapore, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The culture in Singapore really emphasizes education, so tutoring is a huge industry.
I see.
And it's perfect for students because, you're already in the academic world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you can kind of set your own hours and often work from home or travel to students' locations.
Okay. So tutoring, retail, F&B. What about those freelance gigs that we hear about?
Yeah.
The digital marketing, writing, all those online jobs.
Yeah, that's where the gig economy comes in.
Ah, the gig economy.
It's this whole new world of, flexible short-term jobs,
Yeah.
and they're often facilitated by these online platforms like Fiverr and Upwork,
Okay.
which are pretty popular in Singapore,
I see.
especially among students who have skills in, writing, design, social media management, that kind of thing.
So it's a great way to make extra cash.
Exactly. And gain experience in a field that you're interested in,
Yeah.
even if it's not directly related to your studies.
Yeah. I mean, imagine you're a student and you have, a knack for graphic design.
Yeah.
You could be designing logos for businesses around the world, all while studying in Singapore.
Yeah.
It's amazing how technology opens up all of these opportunities. Okay, so let's get back down to earth here. We talked about real life stories before. And one that really caught my eye was about this psychology student, Charming Gan, at the National University of Singapore.
Oh, yeah.
She's balancing her studies with a part-time tutoring job.
Her story is really fascinating because she doesn't just manage, she thrives. And she spoke about how tutoring allows her to apply concepts that she learns in her psychology classes to her work,
Oh, wow.
which gives her a much deeper understanding of learning styles and teaching methods. So it's a perfect example of how a part-time job can actually complement your studies, not just financially, but academically as well.
That's a good point. It's not just about the money. It's about the experience. But speaking of money, what can students realistically expect in Singapore? What kind of hourly wages?
On average, you're probably looking at around 8 to 15 Singapore dollars an hour.
Okay.
It varies a lot depending on the job, experience, the industry.
Sure.
But even that range can make a real difference for a student. It can help cover those daily expenses or maybe even fund a weekend trip to, explore Malaysia. So it's really about getting a sense of financial independence. But it's not all sunshine and roses.
Oh, hold on. Before we get to the challenges, I just want to pause here for a second.
Yeah.
This is a lot of information. So, dear listener, what's standing out to you so far?
Yeah, what are you thinking? What's surprising you? Hold on to those thoughts because when we come back, we'll unpack the not so glamorous side of working while studying in Singapore. Welcome back to our deep dive. We just scratched the surface of working while studying in Singapore. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of actually finding those part-time jobs.
Okay, yeah. We've talked about the types of jobs, but where do students even start? It can be overwhelming.
Well, one of the best places to start is actually your university.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of institutions in Singapore actually have job boards specifically for students,
Oh.
and some even have career services departments that can really help you with the whole process.
So universities are actually going out of their way to help their students find part-time work.
Yeah, they are.
That's pretty cool. I'm guessing they're not just like, you know, throwing a bunch of random job postings online.
No, not at all. It's really about connecting students with opportunities that fit their skills and interests.
Okay.
And, some universities offer workshops like resume writing, interview skills, how to navigate the Singaporean job market.
I see.
They really understand that part-time work is such a valuable part of the student experience.
That's great. So let's start with the university. What about online job portals? Are those worth exploring?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sites like Fast Jobs, Indeed Singapore, Grab Jobs are great for finding part-time opportunities.
Okay.
You can filter by industry, location, even salary expectations.
Nice.
And don't forget about those freelance platforms we mentioned, Fiverr, Upwork.
Right, right. Those can be game changers for students, especially those with specific skills.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's say you found a few interesting jobs. What should you keep in mind when applying? Is it different for international students?
Well, the basics are the same as any job application.
Okay.
A good resume, highlighting your skills, any relevant experience you have.
Right. Even if you haven't had a formal job, are there other things you can highlight?
Definitely. Think about volunteer work, any extracurricular activities, even projects from your courses.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
All of that can really show your skills.
Right. It's all about showcasing what you can do.
Yeah.
But being an international student, are there any specific things you should mention up front?
I think just be honest and transparent. You know, be upfront about your student status, your visa restrictions. Let potential employers know your availability. Are you free evenings and weekends? Any days you can't work because of classes?
Yeah, setting expectations is important.
Exactly. It just prevents issues later on.
For sure. Do you have any insights on which types of jobs are more student-friendly, maybe more flexible? I know you're not a fortune teller, but...
Well, retail and F&B roles are often a good bet.
Okay.
They often have rotating shifts which can be adjusted around class schedules.
Yeah.
Tutoring, as we talked about, offers a lot of autonomy.
Sure.
And then there's always the gig economy, like being a delivery rider. Set your own hours, work independently. But
But...
yeah, there's always a but. The flexibility is amazing, but it's really important to understand the demands.
What do you mean?
Well, delivery riders, for example, they're out in the elements, they face traffic, and the income can be, up and down.
Oh, I see.
So you have to weigh those factors.
That's a good point. And even in a busy city like Singapore, those flexible jobs can be demanding when you're also trying to study.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about finding the right fit, not just any job.
Right. So let's say you aced the application and landed the perfect job. How do you actually manage the work-study balance once things get busy?
Well, first, accept that it's going to be a bit of a juggling act.
Oh.
Some days will be easier than others. That's where time management comes in, prioritizing tasks, breaking down big assignments, using tools like calendars, to-do lists, just to stay organized.
Yeah, time management. That's the advice we hear for everything in student life. Are there any strategies that are particularly helpful for students who are also working?
I would say don't be afraid to communicate
Okay.
with both your employer and your professors.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you have a big exam coming up or you need to change your work schedule, just let them know. Most people are really understanding.
Yeah, as long as you're upfront.
Exactly. It's about being responsible and finding solutions.
That's good advice. And you're not alone in this, right? There are tons of other students going through the same thing.
You're absolutely right. And, lean on your support system, your friends, family, other working students.
Yeah.
Just sharing experiences and advice can make things so much less stressful.
It's true. Just knowing other people are going through the same thing can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
And celebrating those wins together. Finishing a tough week, getting a good grade, or even just treating yourself to a nice meal after a long shift. It makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a bigger question, right? We've talked about can you work, how to find a job, how to manage it all. But what about should you work while studying in Singapore?
That's the big question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. It really depends on the individual student.
Yeah, so many factors to consider.
So many. Your
Yeah.
financial needs, your academic goals, even your personality, your preferences.
Right. Some people thrive in a busy environment, juggling all these things. Others maybe need more downtime to focus.
Yeah. And that's perfectly fine.
Exactly. There's no right or wrong. It's about knowing yourself and making a choice that works for you. And we'll dive into those personal considerations in part 3 of our deep dive.
Welcome back. So we've explored all those ins and outs of part-time work in Singapore, like the regulations, the job searching, all that. But like, should you actually work while studying in Singapore?
I mean, that's the question, right? There's no simple yes or no. It depends on what works for you as the student.
Exactly. So what are some of those key things that students should think about?
I think let's start with like probably the most obvious one, which is your finances.
Okay.
Do you need to work? Like, is it a need to cover your living expenses? Or are you more looking at just gaining experience, that financial independence?
Yeah, like you really have to be honest with yourself. It's easy to think, oh, I want that extra cash. But if it means sacrificing your studies, your experience in this amazing city,
Mm,
is it really worth it?
that's such a good point. And speaking of studies, I think that's the other big factor, right?
Yep. How demanding is your course load? Can you actually handle both studying and working without burning out? Or without your grades suffering?
I'm sure some courses are just way more intense than others.
For sure.
Maybe your program has a little bit more flexibility or you have more free time in certain semesters. You
Yeah.
really have to know what you can handle academically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no shame in admitting that a part-time job just isn't in the cards for you right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also don't forget about those personal preferences.
Right.
Some people love that structured environment, juggling a ton of things at once.
Hmm.
Others need a little bit more time to relax and just focus on one thing.
For sure. And if the thought of adding work to your already like crazy student life makes you want to just hide,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not the best choice for you at that moment. You have to put your mental and physical health first.
Absolutely. And remember, paid work isn't the only way to gain experience.
That's
Volunteering, internships, joining student clubs, all of those things offer some amazing opportunities to grow without the pressure of a paid job.
It's about finding those things that really fit your goals.
Hmm.
Maybe it's about that income, maybe it's about trying out a specific field, or even just connecting with some cool people. There are so many ways to have an awesome student experience.
Huh.
Okay, so we talked about the good stuff. But what about the downsides to working while studying?
Yeah.
We've mentioned time management, burnout. What else should students be aware of?
I think one thing to consider is just the job market itself.
Okay.
Students on student passes have those rules about the kinds of jobs they can take and the number of hours they can work. So you might find yourself kind of limited to certain sectors or roles that aren't your first choice.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And I guess any work experience is good, but it's important to be strategic. Like if you're going for a specific career, prioritize those opportunities that fit in, even if they're like unpaid internships or volunteering.
Totally agree with that. Those experiences can really lead to some much better jobs down the line. Another thing to consider is just the impact on your social life.
Yeah.
Working, even part-time, takes away time from other stuff.
Yeah. Being a student in Singapore isn't just about studying. There's so much to explore, to try, people to meet, that amazing food.
Yeah.
It would be a bummer to miss out on that just because you're working all the time.
Exactly. It's all about that balance. So if you
Yeah.
decide to work, really be mindful of your social life, your hobbies, those things that make you happy and help you recharge. Set some boundaries, prioritize yourself, make good choices about how you're spending your time.
I like that.
And if you start to feel super overwhelmed or alone, don't hesitate to reach out for support. Talk to your friends, family, your university. They're there for you.
That's so important to remember. You're not alone in this whole experience. So we've gone over those pros and cons, all the things to consider. Hopefully this gave you something to think about.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the decision of whether to work or not in Singapore is a personal one. There's no like magical answer.
No magic formula. The most important thing is that you're making a good decision, one that works for you, your goals, your well-being, all of that.
I love that. It's your experience, your adventure. So, dear listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with this. What really stuck with you? What did you learn? What steps are you going to take to have the best possible experience in Singapore, whether that means working or not?
Keep learning, keep asking those questions. Ask for help when you need it, and trust your gut feeling.
You got this. And that wraps up our deep dive into part-time work for international students in Singapore. We hope you found it, helpful, insightful, maybe even a little inspiring.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.